Hello everyone watching on YouTube and hello to everyone watching on Twitch. This is run number 2 by the way for this intro. But today I wanted to do a small discussion video about siege weapons. So I wanted to be a talk about or a discussion video about siege weapons, when to use them, which ones to use, and what they're used for in general. So hopefully after this video you guys will know which siege units to use, with your army and with your civ, and why they're so useful for your army composition. So in general, you guys have maybe heard me say that your army composition in late imp should be 1 gold unit, 1 trash unit, and 1 siege unit. But with siege, it's a little bit hard to determine what they're used for and which one that you should go for at any particular point in time. So here I've got the Ethiopian tech tree and I've got all the siege units available, and of course we can't forget the Trebuchet from the castle as well as part of our siege unit discussion. So we're going to start out with the siege workshop here and just go through all our options and determine which one is, or which option is going to do what exactly, and which ones we need for a current situation. So starting off, we have the battering ram line, so siege ram, etc., or battering ram, cap ram, siege ram, and this is mostly used for taking out buildings and pushing, castles and whatever other buildings your opponent might have in front of those castles, and really just trying to break your opponent's base. That's the main use for siege rams. However, they also have a secondary use, which is soaking up arrow fire. So if you take a look at the battering ram, or let's take a look at the siege ram, it's going to be more commonly used in imp. That actually has 195 pierce armor. So it's going to take like 1 damage from basically any projectile, assuming there's no attack bonus. And so with 270 HP, that's a lot of arrows that are being soaked up. They're also really good at tanking and frontlining for your units, both against melee and ranged, because even melee units, they do a lot of damage to them, but you have 270 HP, so it's still a decent tank for your units if you have some backline along with them. So you'll commonly see like Halb ram as the compositions, or Arbalest siege ram as the composition in imp, because you'll have to push the buildings with the rams and then DPS with Halb or Arbalest in the back. The other hand, we have this mangonel, onager, and siege onager line. And while mangonel might be useful in castle age at deterring small groups of skirms and archers or whatever else the case may be, onagers and siege onagers have a couple other uses in the late game. First of all, these 2 units both allow you to cut down enemy trees, so you're able to break in through their base by cutting in on closed maps like Black Forest and Arena. And they also take out mass groups of units, both in infantry, archers, and they can even take out cavalry if you have enough of them, if you make use of the attack ground feature of the onagers. This is mainly used as doing high DPS in the back of your army though, and it can take out a lot of trash units or a lot of bunched up range units in your opponent's backline. And not every civ has siege onagers, so you have to be careful on which ones which civs have them and which ones don't. Generally speaking, onager usually does pretty good job in the early imp, but if you want to go for late imp, generally speaking, siege onager is definitely a big upgrade. It is very expensive though. It does cost 1450 food and 1000 gold, so I'd only consider going for it if you're in a team game and you have trade to sustain it, or if you have a lot of relics in 1v1 and your army composition depends on it, again flattening your enemy squishy units. Like I said, it works best against squishy bunched up units, this onager line. Next up, we have the Heavy Scorpion, and this one it gets a little bit confusing, Scorpion and Heavy Scorpion, because on the surface it kind of does a similar job as the Mangonel, where it takes care of units that are bunched up, but the Scorpion has a different tool set to it. So first off, the Scorpion doesn't have an attack ground feature. So in Castle Age, you'd actually only be able to right-click your opponent's army with it. That being said, the Scorpions do attack faster and are cheaper. So if you take a look at the Scorpion cost, it's only 75 wood and 75 gold compared to the Mangonel, which is 160 wood and 135 gold. So in Castle Age, maybe making a couple Scorpions has been very popular recently at taking care of small groups of crossbows and skirmishers. And Scorpions do tend to be pretty well against pikemen in Castle Age if you're getting pike push. So going Scorpion Knight is a good composition, for example, to defend that. Now going into like the more Imperial Age focused area with the Heavy Scorpion. Heavy Scorpion is great against mass units like the Onager. However, it's also, unlike the Onager, really good against infantry without needing extra micro. So Onager could be good against infantry, but it does require you to attack ground, whereas the Scorpion lets you just patrol them in and they'll bunch up and take out any incoming infantry. Also, Scorpion does good damage even if the units come 1 by 1 or in a line, whereas for Onagers, they need to really be clumped up for you to get the big shots in. So Scorpion is a little bit more consistent damage per second, or DPS, in the late game, whereas Onagers is kind of hit or miss. Either you get the big shots or you're completely missing and not hitting any value, or not getting any value out of your units. So that's one thing to keep in mind in the late game, which ones to go for. And again, it really depends a lot on what your Civ has options available for you. The last thing I'll talk about for these two units is the fact that they're not really good against buildings. So Onagers could take out buildings if you mass enough of them, like castles and such, but Scorpions are really not the best against buildings, and I wouldn't suggest going for it. So only go for Scorpions if you need some, DPS unit in the back that's good against infantry and some range units as well. And they excel against trash units as well. So skirmishers, hussars, and halbs, Scorpions do pretty well. I will also say that Scorpions matched up can do pretty well against cav, as long as you have a buffer in front of them. Something like halbs to keep the cav away from them can be a very good composition as well. And the last thing, sorry, one more thing to mention about Scorpions is the fact that the projectile actually goes, through units. So, you can get, if the units are coming at you in a line, your shots will go right through it and do damage to more than one unit. It's not just one unit that you're hitting. Pretty obvious though. All right, so Bombard Cannon is the last siege unit I'm going to talk about in the Siege Workshop. Siege Tower is just a situational one to hop over walls. It's not that useful to talk about too much. But Bombard Cannon might actually be one of the most useful siege units in 1v1. Basically, Bombard Cannon is a little bit of a mix between a Trebuchet and a Onager. It does splash damage with its cannon, so you could do really well against ranged units. And it has also 12 range, which is 4 more base than the Onager. However, the splash rate is much smaller than the Onager, so you're gonna get like medium shots with these if you're attacking range units. But the good part about it is that you can do it from much further away. 12 range is quite nice. And Bombard Cannon is actually quite useful at countering your opponent's trebs as well. If you can get in range with the Bombard Cannon, you can completely snipe the trebs and then just move away. If the trebs fires back at you, you can dodge and then hit it again because the treb can't move. So the Bombard Cannon is a great counter if you're getting trebbed. Definitely consider going for it. And if not, the Bombard Cannon is just a really good option at taking out buildings. It does very good damage against buildings, and it also does very good damage against range units. Like I said, you're able to micro it back and constantly hit those range units as they approach you. So it kind of serves a purpose like in between the Treb and the Onager in that sense. The one thing you have to be careful of though is that you need chemistry for it. So you actually need to wait the chemistry tech. It's a long tech, so in Imp you have to get chemistry first, and then only after that you can make the Bombard Cannon. Whereas Trebuchet you can make it at the start of Imp. So that's the kind of like the difference I like to say between them. And also Bombard Cannon is the most expensive unit in the game. 225 wood, 225 gold. So they're very precious. You need to make sure you're not losing them. But the last thing I'll talk about with the Bombard Cannon is that the fact that it's able to move allows you to be way more flexible with it than the Trebuchet. Trebuchet, you have to pack it up. And so if you're getting pushed all of a sudden, you can't retreat, you're going to lose your treb. With the Bombard Cannon, you can retreat as soon as you're getting pushed. And a lot of times, you can fire back once or twice. Like I said, it does pretty good against range units and like squishy targets. Not so good against cav though, obviously. And so, Bombard Cannon, really good flex tool instead of the Trebuchet. And for the final one, we have the Trebuchet. If I can just scroll there. Trebuchet costs 200 wood and 200 gold. It has 16 base range, 150 HP, but the problem with this is that you actually have to pack it up for it to do damage against buildings. Trebuchets, this might not be talked about too much, but are actually really good against units. So basically, Trebuchet has a lot of attacks, so they one-shot pretty much every single regular land unit, but they don't really do splash damage. They only hit one unit, so it's actually single target, not splash damage, which is very interesting. So if you're attacking at a group of crossbows, or let's say Arbalest and Imp, let's say it's got 40 Arbalest very far, you send like 5 Trebuchet shots, the max you'll hit is actually 5 units if the shots land. So Trebuchets could be good against units that are really far away, but again, that's not their main use. The main use of Trebuchets is taking out buildings at a long range, especially castles. I'd recommend you guard your Trebuchets with something like Halb, any range unit possible, or just raid your opponent somewhere else to distract him and then pack the Trebuchets, because like I said, as soon as you commit a Trebuchet to a certain area, you can't run away fast. So you have to be prepared to fight, or at least prepared that your opponent doesn't react instantly. Very important not to lose these guys. They're very expensive units, and so you want to make sure you're getting full value out of them when you do decide to go for it. Alright, so just a quick recap here as I've been through all the siege weapons. General compositions that you can use them with, like I said, Halb Ram, Arbalest Ram, very strong. For Onagers, it usually comes up when you have Cav. So you have Cavalier plus Onager. Another good thing could be like Arbalest Onager, but that can kind of adapt to cavalry. And then Halberdier Onager is the last composition you can go with. So again, just anything to defend the Onager is really the good part there. And then Heavy Scorpion is really a situational one in late game, where it's really good if you have if you need an answer to trash units or mass Halberdier. So usually what goes well with Scorpions is something like Cav or Hussar, so you can raid and then the Scorpion is the DPS at the back. Scorpion is very weak to Onagers and Bomber Cannons though, so if you have Scorpions, you have to make sure you have Cavalier or Hussar to snipe those two siege weapons, and that's why that composition really works. So I'd say the best composition is probably Halb Onager, Halb Siege or Arbalest Siege, Cav Scorpions, and then Bomber Cannon works really well with Arbalest, because you're gonna get it's probably the best composition is Arbalest Bomber Cannon, because you're going to need to get chemistry anyways, so getting the Bomber Cannon out faster makes a lot of sense, and this way you don't need a castle to be able to push buildings. So Bomber Cannon Arbalest is your go-to, and then the Trebuchet really works well when you have a castle, but you don't have a university for chemistry, or your Civ simply doesn't get Bomber Cannon, because a lot of Civs don't get it. So one last thing to mention here is when deciding your siege weapon, decide which use you need it for, DPS, taking up buildings, or soaking up damage, and then decide based on what your Civ has for options and the kind of bonuses and tech tree they have available to you. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the small discussion video. I was asked about it in my Discord to make, this kind of video. So if you guys want to join my Discord, I'm going to leave a link in the description below, and you guys can definitely give feedback there on this video and give me ideas for future videos in small little talk shows like this, or talk videos, not shows, like this. And yeah, the last thing I want to mention is that